Hey there, it's Jordan. Welcome back, and I'm going to show you how I made a pearl handbag for less than 10 bucks. So I've seen tons of these handbags all over Pinterest and my Instagram, and I really love them, and I immediately knew I wanted to make one. They're really cute, they're pretty 90s style, but a lot of the ones that you could buy ended up being really expensive, and I am totally a DIYer at heart, so I thought I could definitely make this. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but I managed to figure it out eventually. So my first step was to try and buy the beads, which I went to Amazon and immediately realized that they were going to be pretty expensive because I needed a lot of them. A lot of things came in packs with different sizes, and I wanted kind of a big size, so it was hard to find a pack that had all one size that also wasn't crazy expensive. A lot of these were $10 to $15 a pack, and I was going to need probably at least 7 or 8 packs of them. So it was going to rack up quite the bill, and I wasn't really looking to spend that much money. Eventually, I made my way to the Dollar Tree website because I had heard that they sold beads in packs at the Dollar Tree. I couldn't find them in store, so I went online and ordered them in a pack of 24 packs, which came in a case. And it said it was going to be mixed sizes, but I did the math and I figured there was probably going to be 8 packs of each size, so I added it to my cart and checked it out, and a few days later they showed up at my house, and luckily for me they did come exactly as I expected with 8 packs in each size, 40, 60, and 80 count in a pack. So I started out by figuring out the dimensions that I want my bag to be. This is going to be the height, and then this is going to equal the circumference because it's basically going to end up being a circle. And I did this just by trial and error and measured the height of my phone to make sure my phone fits in the bag and has a little extra room. So I marked it out with some painter's tape on my grid mat here, and I multiplied length times width and counted the number of squares, and so the total is 105. I've also got my 3 different sizes here, and I want to figure out how many approximately I'm going to need first before I start making it, because the last thing you want is to start making it with one size and only get halfway and realize you're out of beads and either have to go buy more or have to start over with a different size. So I've got a couple of each of the sizes here, and I've written out how many I have of each total. And I'm basically just going to try and line up and fill one of the squares. And this mat is really handy for it. You obviously don't need it, but you can use it if you've got it. So basically that tells me I'm going to need 4 of these sizes-ish, if they'll stop rolling around, to fill up 1 square. And so now I've got 105 squares, and just math tells me that this isn't going to be enough because I've only got 320 of this size. So that one's like out right out the gate. I kind of figured that to begin with, but so now I'm going to go through and figure out what size I'm going to need. I'm hoping this medium size will work, but I have a feeling it might not. I have a feeling it might be a little bit too few. But oh gosh, this is really hard to do with one hand, so I think this is going to end up being a little too small, but I'm going to figure it out and let you know what I decide. Okay, so I've got this first row beaded out, and I found that grabbing a needle with a pretty big end on it was super helpful, especially with this fishing line. It kind of is flimsy and hard to see, and it just made beading them go a lot faster. Another thing is that some of them are in the pack that are attached like this. You do not want them to be attached because it will make weaving the rows together much harder, so just take a pair of like heavy-duty scissors and just cut them. It's pretty thin plastic, so it popped right off. It separated them pretty easily. Another thing was that I ended up shortening the length of it. I took about 1 inch off. So after I laid out this first row, I counted how many beads it took to make 1 full row, and then using my total number that I have, I was able to figure out how many rows I would be able to make, and I held my phone up against the number was 14, and my phone was just a little bit too close to being at the top, so I wanted my bag to be a little bit deeper, so I just took 2 beads off the end, and now I can get 15 rows up and down, and I just made it a little bit narrower, which I'm fine with. So now I'm going to go ahead and make the second row. So now I've got my first 2 lines beaded, and now I'm going to go about attaching them so that they are secured into one piece. And to do that, I drew out a little diagram, and I'm just going to take another piece of this fishing line, and it's basically going to act as the red line. I'm going to go up one, over one, and all the way across to secure these 2 lines together. So this was a huge learning process project for me. Like I said at the beginning, I thought it was going to be really, really easy, and it ended up being a lot more difficult than I thought it was, mostly because I was just going too fast and not really thinking it through. So I do recommend not using fishing line, and I'll show you in clips later in the video why. It just is really slippery. It's really hard to tie knots. It doesn't, just trust me, it was a really big pain in the end. I would recommend doing what I'll call like the ground lines using kind of a thin gauge wire, which you can also get at the Dollar Tree, so it's also super affordable. And then I would recommend weaving the lines together with like a thick, either like a white embroidery thread or just like a thick actual sewing thread. Again, the fishing line was just way too difficult to work with, and it caused me such headaches at the end. So learn from my mistake on this one. So here I am just continuing to weave the lines together, and in the next clip you'll see that it jumps ahead and all of my rows were beaded. I recommend only beading the row as you go. It got kind of messed up and was harder to get my fingers in there to weave them together. So I would definitely recommend weaving them together as you go. And here I'm just showing you how I finished off the edge. And this is also why I recommend a thread, because you have to eventually tie a knot with this fishing line, and it's just really hard to work with. It was super slippery. A bunch of the beads towards the end ended up just coming off because the knots were not secure. So just basically just looping it through a couple of the beads at the end to secure the row after you've woven 2 rows together, and it'll be so much easier to secure if you're just using a regular thread as opposed to this fishing line. And here's just a little clip of some of the mayhem that ensued because of the fishing line, and it just did not secure. I ended up having to glue a bunch of the pieces together, which I was not super happy with, but it got the job done in the end. But trust me, use a thin gauge wire to bead the rows and use a regular thread to weave them together. You will thank me for it, believe me, because trying to tie the fishing line together to connect the rows on each end was just a nightmare. And here's just another shot of the other end where I'm finishing off the other end. I'm doing it with a different type of thread because I actually ran out of wire, but this is just pretty much just finishing off the edge so that all the beads are connected at the end. There's really no special trick to doing it, just secure them in some way. This was how I did it. And here you can see I'm turning the sheet basically into a circular cylindrical shape, and this is where you can totally see where I ended up beading through some wire into a couple of the rows to help secure it. And you can see if you did that for every row, it would be so much easier to connect them. You can just twist the wire together, tuck it on the inside, secure it with a little glue if you want. It would be so much easier to secure the bag that way than what I ended up doing. But I got there in the end. But this was definitely the way to go, and you can see how much faster and easier and more secure it ends up being when you use the wire. And this is another do as I say, not as I do moment. This was how I thought I was going to create the bottom of the bag. I'll show you in a very hastily drawn diagram in a minute what I should have done. I tried to weave this little circular shape, and it turned out okay. It looks fine. It held on, but it just was way more difficult than it needed to be, and I'm like kicking myself watching all these clips back at how hard of a time I made it for myself to do this, when what I should have done would have been so much easier. So don't do this. This is more just to show you that I don't always know what I'm doing, but I do my best. So I apologize for the very hastily and badly drawn diagram. I literally just threw this up while I was editing these clips together because I was so annoyed at myself. This is how I'd recommend you finish off the bottom of the bag. Use the black line as basically just more of the thin wire, bead it across the bottom and secure it on the other side. You can tuck the little ends on the inside of the bag, and then use your needle and thread with some more of the same thread that you used to connect the rows before, and just weave them all together. The wire will keep the bottom secure enough onto the bag, and the thread will just kind of act to keep it all together. Honestly, this would be so much easier than what I tried to do and way more secure. This is more just so you can see how I set my bag up. I had like a skinny vase, which conveniently was also from the Dollar Tree at one point, to kind of stand it inside, so it kind of held it upright. And this is just so you can really see what I'm talking about. I did not think this through well enough, and this was a hot mess to say the least. So the method that I drew out in my very crappy diagram, I promise, is probably the better way to go on this. And this was more towards the end of attaching the bottom, and this is where I really realized that it would have just been so much easier to thread the beads onto some wire and then weave in extra. This is me putting in a couple extra beads where there were some gaps, and it just makes it way much easier if you do as I say and not as I do, which seems to be the theme of this current video. And I also very stupidly forgot to record attaching the handle to this bag, but it's literally as easy as you think it is, just more wire, more beads. I ended up using the larger size beads just because I thought it might look cute, but it was pretty simple other than that, and I just really wanted to get finished with this project because it ended up taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. But it ended up really cute, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. And here's how it turned out. I'm so happy with the result, and all in all, I'm really happy that I tackled this project. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss more fashion and lifestyle DIYs. Thanks!